So, Lumpur, our first question tonight goes, Ajahn has said the Arupa jhanas come out of the fourth jhana. Is it like a ladder, much the same as the first four, or is it like four different paths one can take? Before the Buddha entered Parinibbana, he showed his mastery by ascending and descending the jhanas. But before he died, someone asked the elder Anuruddha where he was. He wasn't in fifth and not in fourth. Where was he?
Well, I can't answer that question because I wasn't there. But yeah, they say, actually, you hear different things. Sometimes they say went up to fourth, back to first jhana. And he was neither in one or the other because he was not attached to anything. Perhaps he didn't want us to get too attached to the state or the level of jhana. So practicing jhana is a practice of relinquishment, and you might say withdrawing from what is coarse, knowledge of the coarse, to more knowledge of the more refined. So the first rupa jhanas are based on physical form, whereas the arupa jhanas, one as if steps back or withdraws from the physical form and takes on ever in more subtle, refined objects. So infinite space, infinite consciousness, nothingness, neither perception nor non-perception. So neither perception nor non-perception. It's like there's really nothing your mind is settling on other than the fact that you're still aware. You still know you're aware, but you're not really perceiving much at all. But you're not asleep, obviously. It's ever more kind of like stepping back, stepping back, stepping back. But you have to have a starting point that you step back from. So the starting point for the arupa jhanas is the fourth jhana. But Nibbana is not the jhanas, but the jhanas are a stepping stone to Nibbana, something that helps you refine the awareness, make the mindfulness and the awareness very, very refined of the most subtle states of mind. So it's something that's very helpful, but ultimately it's insight or panya that leads to enlightenment, relinquishing all attachment, even to the jhanas, the rupa jhanas, the arupa jhanas, any of the the most subtlest conceit, mana, that even, let's say, an anagami has. Only an arahant has abandoned that. And they say the mind of an arahant, whether it's the Buddha or a Savaka, an enlightened disciple of the arahant, it just doesn't alight or settle on anything because everything is being penetrated as not self and not to be grasped at as self. So then if that's the state of mind you're experiencing, I assume you would not have anything at all, even a jhana you wouldn't grasp at as self, you wouldn't attach to. You can enter jhana and leave jhana, but you don't grasp at it. So the mind is just completely in a state of non-grasping, non-clinging. Maybe I'll just say that on this very subtle, refined question.
Sadhu Lumpur. Next question. What's the relationship between the history of the Ramayana and Ramakien? Are the characters real people, Rishinga, for example, or are they just fables that different cultures have borrowed?
Well, like many things that get stories and fables and legends that get handed down over the centuries, you can't help but have a certain amount of embellishment and imagination added in for ease of telling, for interest. But maybe there's a starting point in all of this that was to do with devas and beings, maybe historical beings as well, people, but also devas. But as I said, over the handing these stories down, there's going to be a certain amount of embellishment. It's the same even, with some aspects of the suttas. We have those suttas that we believe are very close to the words of the Buddha. We can't be absolutely sure because we weren't there, but some seem very close to the words of the Buddha and seem to confirm with each other that they are very unembellished, unchanged. And then there's others that seem to be additional texts from maybe later monks or commentators have added on or slightly changed them. That's the fact of life, isn't it? When you hand information down, whether it's verbally or even in writing, over the centuries, over the generations, things can get changed a little bit here, a little bit there. You just have to accept that. So I think what you're pointing out, well, there'll be some of that going on. But maybe there's still plenty you can learn from these stories. There's often, a lot of Dhamma in the Ramayana or the Ramakien. But whether you're interested in that or not is another matter. I mean, if you're just interested in practicing for Margapala Nibbana, you don't necessarily have to read or find out about those stories. But if it helps to inspire you and it holds your interest, well, there's nothing wrong if you like to read them and study them. That's fine. That's your choice.
Sadhu Luang Por. Next question. I heard a rumor Luang Por Tui is coming to visit one last time. Is this true?
I don't know. You have to ask him, not me. It'd be nice if it's true. I'll try and find out. We'll try and get some information. If he does come to Australia and visits us, if that happened, well, you'll get to hear about it for sure. But I haven't heard anything. And he's very old. How old is he now? 90? Yeah, he's about 90. So I'm a bit doubtful about that, but we live in hope, don't we?
Sadhu. Next question. Not sure who it's referring to, but Luang Ta talked about different levels of sati, sati sampajanya, and mahasati, for example. If one catches the anapanasati sniffles and is doing breath samadhi in all four postures, what level is this?
Not sure anapanasati sniffles is a technical term. I'm not even sure if it means something good or bad. Does that mean you are struggling with your anapanasati because you're sniffling, you have sinus or cold? Or does it mean you actually are doing well and you're constantly with your breath in, breath out? I'm not quite sure what you mean by it, but Luang Ta, I assume you mean Luang Ta Mahabua, talks about different levels of sati. Yes, any teacher will probably mention that there's your initial practice of sati, your mindfulness. So you're cultivating anapanasati, mindfulness of the breath, or reciting Buddha. It's going to be not continuous to begin with. You have moments of mindfulness and you lose your mindfulness. You're with the breath and then you lose that. You're distracted by the five hindrances, and then you regain mindfulness with the breathing and maybe can drop some of the hindrances for a while and then they come back. There's a lot of back and forth between the mind mindful of its object, reciting Buddha or with the breath or any of the other objects, and then the mind that's caught into the five hindrances. And we call them hindrances for a reason. They hinder you from being mindful. They take your mindfulness away and fill your mind up with desire, anguish, sleepiness, dullness, anxiety, restlessness, doubt, and so on. And so practice is about working through these hindrances, making mindfulness really strong and continuous, making it there all the time. So if you're using mindfulness of breathing as your main object, yes, like you say, bringing the mind to the breath to the point where whether you're standing, walking, sitting, or lying down, maybe you can keep your mind with the breath, or almost all the time with the breath. That might be one goal for someone either on a retreat or in a monastic situation, a situation where they've got a lot of time to really devote to their practice. They could do that or aim for that. It's a matter of your own practice, isn't it? When the mind gathers together, we call that samadhi, but whether it's gathering together, unifying, becomes one-pointed, the hindrances pass away or subside, whether that's just for a few moments, a few minutes, or for many minutes, or for many hours. There are depths to samadhi, or depths, strength. There's a strength of samadhi. So if mindfulness is you're becoming more skilled at keeping the mind, the breath in mind, the hindrances are bothering you less and less because you're skilled at staying with the breath, letting go of hindrances. Your mind gathers together, then it may experience what we call kanika samadhi for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. It gathers together, piti, sukha, ekaggata, the factors of jhana arise, but briefly. So it's not yet considered to be jhana or appana samadhi, but it's still an important step in your practice. It also depends on other factors like your body, your physical body, whether you're strong, weak from illness, whether perhaps you've not slept enough, or whether you've eaten too much food or too little food. There'll be a few other factors that may influence it. But there'll be periods, if you keep practicing regularly, where your mind gathers together and the mental energy seems to all come into one place, and mindfulness is continuous. You're not distracted. Your mind is not wandering all over the place anymore. So we call that kanika samadhi. And so if you experience that more and more, well, you probably keep practicing, and there may be times when your mind goes much deeper for much longer, what we call upajjhara samadhi, half an hour, 1 hour, where the mind gathers together, the piti is strong, the sukha is there, the stillness of mind, the one-pointedness. You're not distracted, the hindrances are not bothering you. But if you can still hear sounds, a thought can arise, you can turn to contemplate something. This is what we call upajjhara samadhi. It's not appana or jhana. But if you keep practicing, the mind may go deeper still, and the mindfulness is more stronger and more continuous for longer. Get to the point where the mind becomes absolutely still or one-pointed on its object. You might experience first jhana or appana samadhi. So it's about practice. Keep practicing, but if you get to that level, either upajjhara or appana samadhi, like you say, you're experiencing the samadhi, the piti, the sukha, the one-pointedness in all postures, not just when you're sitting and then you stop sitting and it all disappears. You get up from your seat to go and walk meditation or do different activities, the samadhi goes with you, and it can last for days. The piti and sukha. You sleep very little when you attain appana samadhi. Your mind is very awake. So you might sleep enough just to keep your body healthy and rested, but it may be very brief periods and then you're awake again. So these are grades, levels of samadhi that come through practice, but you really have to be dedicated to it. So probably quite hard to attain if you have a normal job, a normal lifestyle, kids to look after and so on like that. On a retreat, you might be able to, or certainly if you go and live in a monastery, if you ordain, you might have more time available to really practice. You just do the best you can. I wouldn't think too much about the levels of samadhi, but just keep observing how strong your mindfulness is, how well you're able to stay with the breath, what hindrances, if they are coming up, what hindrances are bothering you. Because we often have particular weaknesses We lose our temper. We have all kinds of desire. We have lust. We have worries and anxieties. We fall asleep. We have usually a range of different hindrances bothering us, and it's how well you're working through them and letting them go. And it can be very tedious, repetitive practice. But the ones who attain samadhi are the ones who don't give up. You have to keep going until you can do it. Like anything, you're learning a skill, a certain kind of knowledge, a skill in some aspect of life. Everything takes effort, patient effort, time. Keep going until you can do it. But the rewards of developing the path, particularly sila, samadhi, and impanya, are better than any other reward, any worldly reward. So I would say it's the best activity to put your effort into, rather than just making money or learning a sport or playing an instrument or something. I would say this is the best way to devote your time and energy. But everyone's different, aren't they?
Sadhu Luang Por. Next question. Dear Luang Por, please excuse the question, but what should we do if lust arises whilst meditating, e.g. when doing metta meditation? It seems like lust and piti, sukha have some similarities in the feeling tone. Please advise. Thank you so very much.
Very much. So I think everyone will have to experience this to some extent, because everyone has lust. You wouldn't be born as a human being if you didn't have lust. You're born into the world because of your previous lust from a previous life. What is lust? Well, it's very much connected to attachment to this body, identifying with the body as me, myself. All the physical feelings of lust are very strong, the pleasures we have with this body. Everyone has that, whether they recognize it or not. It's just normal part of a human existence. So getting to know what stimulates it, what we call ayoniso manasikara, unwise attention, will stimulate lust. So going to memories and fantasies of objects that stimulate lust, so images of people and maybe people you've known in the past, people you've met, or just creating them out of nothing, whatever. We do that. We go unwisely to the object and then we develop that object with lust. We enjoy it. Could be just for a few moments, could be for many minutes, a long time. Sometimes it's an external stimulus. You see something that sets off your lust. You meet somebody, some situation sets lust off. You see something online, whatever. That's why we practice sila. Sila is partly to limit the stimulation in terms of lust. So you might keep 8 precepts or 5 precepts. So you start cutting off inappropriate attention, looking at other women, if you're a man, looking at other women, if you're a woman, looking at other men, thinking about them, looking at them, indulging in them, whether it's online or in person, say. Sila helps you to be more disciplined and start cutting off and simplifying your life. Internally, you have to do it with mindfulness, patience, and awareness and insight, clear comprehension. Stop going to those memories, stop fantasizing. It takes some, what we call nekama, renunciation. You have to say, no, I'm not going to think about that. No, I'm going to let it go. In the first instance, that's what you do. You develop nekama, sila, and sense restraint. As you develop your practice, you need to develop mindfulness and insight and methods of insight that will help you deal with lust when it arises. So you have an image, instead of developing that image in a way that stimulates you to get pleasure and attract you, you might look at the unattractive side of that image. So even in your mind, you can develop a super images, and you look at the parts of the body that are not attractive. You remind yourself of them, you focus your mind on them. If you're looking externally at a person or a picture, and look for the unattractive side. Remind yourself of that. Even the most beautiful body gets smelly, gets dirty over time. That's why we need to wash. The things associated with the body, the clothes, the decorations get dirty, need to be washed. That's what bodies are. They're a source of dirt, grease, all kinds of liquids and solids come out of this body, and then pretty much all pretty unpleasant stuff. And we try and get rid of them as quick as we can because we don't like them. We're always looking for the attractive and moving away from the unattractive. But as a meditation, you're now directing your mind to consider the unattractive, to balance up your thinking, to develop the perception of the unattractive, so you're familiar with that. Then when lust arises, you can go to that perception. So instead of looking for what you like, you look at what you don't like, and that's the truth of the human body, that it can be attractive, sure, but there's also unattractive. And we tend to ignore that. You mentioned metta meditation. Yeah, this is one of the dangers of metta meditation, is you're wishing people well, you're bringing up a warm, relaxed feeling, good feeling, and then you direct that feeling and that thought to someone. Well, that someone could stimulate lust for you very quickly. If it's the opposite sex or it's somebody you like, the metta may be there for a moment and then it crumbles and just turns into lust. I like them, and you end up falling in love with the person you were just wishing them well, and then you fall in love with them. So there's a danger there. So as a monk, you're always taught, don't spread metta or dwell on images of females, because you'll end up falling in love with them until your insight is very strong, and that may be, when you're at an advanced stage in your practice. You don't want to dwell too much on females if you're a male, or males if you're a female. So you have to be careful. You have to be restrained and use wisdom and insight to guide your metta practice. And like you say, with metta, you get a lot of very comfortable, pleasant feelings, which is what you're wishing for yourself or others. But for some people, that just triggers lust. So you have to be very careful. You have to keep mindful, keep aware of what you're doing, what's leading to what, cause and effect. They always say, the monk in the forest has to be very careful if a female deva comes to see them, because female devas bring with them a lot of piti and sukha, and they're very beautiful. And in the history of Buddhism, many monks have fallen in love with devas, and you have to be very careful to keep restrained equanimous, not to get attached to a female deity, a female deva, because it can stimulate lust. And in the same way, female humans. So one has to be on guard, practice restraint, precepts, restraint, develop mindfulness, clear comprehension, and then the practice of asupa, focusing on the unattractiveness of the body, to the point where ultimately that is clear to the mind, and you maybe develop asupa nimittas that you can keep in your mind, or may quite naturally be arising. When your mind is very peaceful and you're doing this contemplation, you could be looking at someone very attractive and they turn into a corpse before your very eyes. They turn into a skeleton before your very eyes. When the insight and mindfulness is strong, continuous, that can happen quite naturally without you even making it happen. It just happens. But sometimes in the lead up to that, you practice it. So you have to make it happen for yourself. You have to focus your mind on the image of the unattractive body part, or seeing the person as a corpse, or yourself as a corpse. You practice it until you're good at it. So good luck. It's not an easy practice. It's not a very popular practice, but it is part of the path. You can't really avoid it. So just work up to it.
Sarulungu. Another question? Dealungpo? I have been practicing metta meditation regularly, but I notice that I still experience frustration and anger at times. May I seek your advice on how I can improve my practice? Thank you, Luang Por.
Keep going. Don't give up. Everyone's the same. Before you can let go of anger, you have to see it, notice it. And as you're noticing it, you'll notice there's sometimes strong anger, sometimes just very quick, fleeting moments of irritation, anger, small bursts of anger, and so on. So you're not going to let it go all in one go. It's quite an advanced thing to completely give up your attachment to anger and the roots of anger. But you keep working at it, keep going. And usually, if you meditate regularly, you'll get to see there's a certain patterns how anger arises. So you see, as I was saying earlier, with unwise attention, you are looking at something that stimulates anger, something you already have a perception you don't like, you don't want. So you're seeing, and then you get a feeling, an unpleasant feeling, a feeling of tension. It can be brief, can be extreme, long-lasting, but a feeling of tension or pain. And then you get negative thinking, and the perception is reinforced. That can be through seeing or hearing the words or the sound that you don't like. Taste, smell, touch, and then memories of all the previous sense contact and previous perceptions that we've already stored up in our mind. So, you think of something you don't like, you get angry. You remember somebody that hurt you or did something you didn't like, you get angry. So just memory can do it as well. But when anger is arising, there's unwise attention, thinking unwisely, unmindfully of something, or turning your attention to it, whether it's external or internal. Then the feeling of tension, and then trains of thought, more perceptions, more detailed sort of stories come up. And if you're not establishing mindfulness and insight, well, it'll carry on, won't it? And it often reinforces itself. It'll come up quicker, more often, more stronger. So one of the hardest things is when you get anger arising, you get a little explosion out from your heart of tension, pain, sometimes a big one, and it's fast. But if you practice a lot of meditation, maybe you can keep in touch with that before you even start going to the perceptions and the thoughts. You're just mindful of the feeling, a painful feeling. Say somebody pricks you with a needle, getting a jab, and you don't like it. You start to get the feeling of tension, but you keep it there. You don't blame the person who's giving you the jab. You don't think all the negative thoughts. You just practice patience, mindfulness with the feeling, and then the feeling subsides. It will be you see something that sets off the feeling, but then you let it subside because you're mindful and you reflect. I don't want to get angry. I acknowledge this feeling arising, old karma. Now I'll let it go. It's temporary, it's impermanent. I'll let it go. You get better, quicker at doing that. So it may be quite natural for you to establish mindfulness every time you notice some tension in the mind or physical tension, pain. And rather than attaching to it and letting it create anger, you let the anger subside, the feeling subside. So it's about practice. Keep doing it, and you get better at it. You get sharper, quicker. You can jump in there quicker rather than just dwelling on the thing that made you angry and those thoughts and that mood over and over again, back and forth. That's how when we start practicing, it's like that. But if you keep practicing, you don't dwell so much on it because it's suffering. You're looking for ways to let it go. And you cultivate more metta and compassion to balance it. And that will also stop anger arising in the first place.
Sadhu Luang Por. Next question. Dear Ajahn, can someone who had depression be able to meditate?
Depends how extreme the depression is, how long they've had it, how extreme it is. As I was saying in the talk, like sometimes it's a medical condition that needs a lot of treatment, a lot of help, counseling, medication. They may or may not be able to come out of it. But then there's also another level of depression that you might say is more ordinary, that everyone experiences sometime or other. We have moments when we're depressed, and sometimes it becomes deeper, but it's still manageable and maybe can be improved. The situation can be improved through meditation and mindfulness practice. So sometimes mindfulness and meditation will help, but sometimes we expect too much from the person that, we think, oh, just go and meditate and your depression will subside, you'll become mindful and let it go. Well, perhaps it's too advanced for that. They're not ready for meditation. Some people, they need to look more at things like lifestyle. Maybe they need to make lifestyle changes because there may be certain things prompting the depression. They may need a lot of advice, counseling, help as well. They may need to look into doing things that make them feel more relaxed and give some meaning to their lives. So things like charity, volunteering, helping others in very simple ways or more complex ways, just depends on the person and the situation. Yeah, I'm not really an expert on depression, but this is what I've learned from being a monk, teaching people with depression, that sometimes there are fairly simple things, changes they can make in their lifestyle, like giving up alcohol and drugs is a very common one that can improve things quickly. But that's also hard to do, isn't it? But it can help. Changing lifestyle, changing relationships. If you're in an abusive relationship or something, maybe that needs to be addressed and changed. Obviously, a lot of people are carrying trauma and bad memories from the past, PTSD, various previous abuses and things that may again need a lot of help, advice, but also developing some good, wholesome activities to help the person develop more happiness in the things they're doing. And then some people are just very depressed, clinically depressed, need healthcare from healthcare professionals. Just telling them to meditate is not going to work. It's not enough. So it depends on the person and the situation. Yes, it can help, but sometimes they need much more than just meditation. And occasionally meditation is the wrong thing to do. They're not ready for it. So it depends on the person.
Sadhu. We have another question here. Thank you, Ajahn, for the encouraging talk. It is very timely as I feel my vasa determinations wavering, and I'm struggling to keep my wholesome habits going. May I know what is the best way to stop beating myself up and negativities when I feel like I'm not reaching the expectations I set for myself? Thank you, Ajahn.
Yeah, well, just being angry with yourself is not going to probably achieve very much other than make you miserable. Go to look at the causes, some of which I was talking about tonight. Make your plan. When are you going to meditate? When are you going to listen to the Dhamma? How can you introduce Dhamma into daily life? Keeping precepts, being more mindful in your work and the things you do. Try to focus more on the parts of the practice you need to develop or keep up if they're wavering, rather than just blaming yourself. We all know we've got weaknesses. We all know we've got mental defilements affecting us. There's no need to get too upset about all that. That's not going to help you. Better to go to the more positive stuff. What do I need to do to improve? What do I need to develop? What do I need to keep up? Sometimes we need to re-establish resolutions, determinations that we've made before, perhaps, and get back to them. Sometimes we need to change lifestyle, how we spend our time, what we're doing. Sometimes we need to sit down and talk to ourselves, remind ourselves why we practice, what the benefits are, and then, of course, listening to Dhamma and getting inputs from Kalyana Mitta, that can help as well. So just, beating yourself up probably is not going to help very much. But yeah, occasionally it's the right thing to do. If you're lying in bed in the morning lazy and you could get up and do half an hour meditation before you go to work, but you're just lying there saying, I can't be bothered. Well, yeah, sometimes you need to kick yourself up the backside and say, get out of it, maybe. But not as a sort of mental habit, always looking down on yourself and blaming yourself. It becomes like a mental habit that's no use to you or anyone. But occasionally give yourself a bit of a boot up the backside. Yeah, that may be useful, may be helpful. Tell yourself to stop doing, if you've got a bad habit, too indulgent in something, tell yourself to stop. Sometimes you have to be a bit harder on yourself with the rules, the precepts. That can be the right thing to do sometimes. If you've got a really bad habit you're trying to kick, sometimes you just have to say to yourself, I would rather die than have another drink or another cigarette, or I'd rather die than watch more porn, or I'd rather die than gamble, or I'd rather die than just spend another morning lying in bed rather than getting up and meditating. Sometimes you make a really strong determination, I'd rather die than. Sometimes that is correct. Do that and see if it helps. Good. It just makes you more depressed. Okay, stop doing that. You need a new approach. You have to see what works for you.
Sadhu Luang Por. Another question here. Dear Luang Por, I've heard a teacher say the only reason we fall into lust is because we are not happy, and to do metta instead of asubha. What do you think about this? Thank you.
Well, sometimes that's correct. Yeah. It's just hard to generalize, isn't it? It depends on the person, where they're at in their practice. The danger with asubha, contemplating the unattractiveness of the body, is it can make you feel miserable if you're not ready for it or you're not doing it in a balanced way. You can get irritable, miserable, take it out on other people. You become grumpy with other people and so on, because you're kind of cutting off where there's a lot of personal investment in happiness. Most people see lust as a source of happiness. So if you cut that off, it's like, I've lost my happiness. So they become grumpy. So you've got to balance that. You've got to get some happiness, wholesome happiness from somewhere else. So sometimes metta is a good balance. Practicing kindness in different ways, generosity in different ways, things that bring out a sense of well-being to balance the sense of loss when you're practicing renunciation and asubha. Really, the best antidote is samadhi. So you develop samadhi in whatever way you can, whether it's anapanasati, metta, recollecting the Buddha. As samadhi comes up, you get a sense of well-being, piti and sukha arise. So then when you turn to contemplate the body, you can cope with it better. It doesn't necessarily make you grumpy. It's like, it sobers you up. So it doesn't make you like ecstatically happy necessarily, but it helps you see the way things are. And that brings peace. If you're practicing asubha meditation correctly, it will make you peaceful. And of course, when you're peaceful, you're not grumpy, you're not unhappy. But to get to that point where you're peaceful from asubha, you may have to do other things first to make you peaceful and ready to practice asubha. So many people will develop generosity, keep precepts, meditate on the breath, on loving kindness, on other things first, and then later they go to asubha. Step-by-step process. That's probably the more common approach, I would say. So if you find you're trying asubha and you're miserable, or if you fall into lust easily, you want to find something else that will balance that. So a meditation object that you're satisfied to be with, experiment, whether it's the breath, or someone was saying yesterday that they reflect on death, and that brings them a sense of contentment and peace. So if it works, do it. And then you will fall into lust less, and then you may be ready to do a super and deal with your lust. So you need to find sources of wholesome happiness that will counter both the lust and also prepare you for the investigation of the unattractiveness of the body. There are few people who do it as their main meditation object from day one, a super meditation from day one, and they get good results. It makes them very peaceful very quickly. But I would say they're a minority. The majority of people need to do a step-by-step process, so they're developing other kinds of happiness, which both counter the lust and also allow them a platform to investigate the Asupra.
Sadhu Luang Por. Are there any further questions?
Well, it's been a long session tonight, I know, so I appreciate your attention and joining in tonight. Because it's the Buddhist holy day, we did a session with meditation, chanting, and the talk. So I hope it's been useful for you, and we'll see you again next time.